Hi, I'm Roby Rocks and welcome to this video. Today I want to present my preset that I created for Fractile Systems. For this video, I'll be using my Axe FX3, which you can see right behind me. With this preset, I made an accurate reproduction of my Rockman modules that you see here. This preset is a detailed recreation of every single module, starting from the Rockman Sustainer, the Distortion Generator, the Instrument EQ, the Stereo Chorus Delay, and of course also the Stereo Echo. Using 5 impulse responses, which I personally created to best replicate this analog system, I managed to replicate all the most important onboard parameters. Now, in this video, I'll explain how to make the best use of this preset. First, let's take a look at the scenes. There are 7 scenes and the first 4 recall the 4 channels present in the Rockman Sustainer. So, there's the Clean 2 channel. The Clean channel. The Edge channel. And the Dis channel. The remaining scenes 5, 6, and 7 activate the distortion generator, specifically the 3 levels of distortion harmonics. Distortion harmonics low level. Distortion harmonics medium level. And distortion harmonics heavy level. These are the 7 scenes with the main 7 sounds. Now I'll show you how to modify our sound just like if we had the real racks in front of us. Starting from the Rockman Sustainer, the first thing we can modify is the preamp gain. In this case, on the Fractile, we act on the volume/pan 1 block, where channels A, B, C, and D correspond to the 4 gain levels, with B being 0 level, the default level. Then we move to the compression unit, where in the original you can choose between 0, 8, 15, and 21. Here, you just select compressor block 1 and choose among A, B, C, and D, where C is the default value. Regarding the noise gate, I decided to keep the gate at the input because the Fractile noise gate is very efficient and it wasn't necessary to replicate it otherwise. Next, we come to the heart of the Rockman Sustainer, the channel selection, which we saw a moment ago in the scenes. Here, you act on the AMP block where A is clean 2, B is clean, C is edge, and D is dist. But be careful because each channel has its own respective impulse response, so if you select channel A on AMP block 1, you also have to select channel A on cabinet block 1. For example, if I choose channel C, edge, on AMP block 1, I must also select channel C on cabinet block 1. This is exactly why I decided to use scenes, so the AMP and CAB pairings are already set when using the scenes. Another control I replicated is the gain boost control, which is an input gain that only affects the edge and disc channels. In Fractal, I replicated this with the filter control. I position myself on the edge channel and test activating it. Then I go to the disc channel. As you can see, the filter changes depending on the selected channel, because that's how the gain boost works on the original. so I recommend not modifying it and leaving it linked to the scenes just as I did. I also replicated the phase notcher control, which is a kind of simulation of partial phase cancellation that happened when miking the cabinet with 2 or more microphones, giving a slightly different voicing. In Fractile, you can activate or deactivate it simply with the parametric equation 1 block. The equalization controls here, called treble boost and volume at the end of the sustainer, I didn't replicate because in Fractile you can simply adjust the cabinet's high cut and level controls. Let's move on to the second module, the distortion generator, which is naturally never used together with the sustainer since normally you use either one or the other. So in Fractile, I use scene number 5 to deactivate the sustainer and activate the distortion generator. The first parameter on this module is sustain, meaning the compressor, which like the sustainer lets us choose the level. So you can select A, B, C, and D, where C is the default level. The distortion harmonics low, medium, heavy control is simulated by selecting channels A for low, B for medium, and C for heavy on amp block 2. In this case, and only in this case, it's not necessary to modify the cabinet block because the impulse response referenced by these 3 channels is the same, so I can switch among channels A, B, C, and D without worrying about the cabinet block, which remains unchanged. The distortion generator has a 3-band equalizer positioned before the distortion unit, and here in Fractile I managed to replicate it with this 3-band graphic EQ block. On the first channel A, all controls are flat, meaning they are at the default position found on the distortion generator. While on channel B, the parameters are at their maximum value, and on channel C they are at their minimum value. I recommend using channel D for your personal adjustments. Also in the distortion generator there is the phase notcher parameter, which behaves slightly differently from the one in the sustainer, and in Fractile you can activate or deactivate it via parametric equation 2 block. Again, the treble boost, equalization, and volume controls can be easily replicated by acting on the high cut and level of the cabinet block. Now let's move on to the third module connected in cascade, the Rockman Instrument Equalizer. This is a common graphic equalizer with 12 bands that I replicated in the Fractile world using a graphic EQ. In this case, the maximum Fractile offers is a 10-band equalizer. Here on channels A, B, C, and D I simply made my most common adjustments, the ones I use most often, so feel free to adjust this equalizer as you like. Now let's talk about the fourth module, the stereo chorus delay. This is a module that can work both as a chorus and as a slapback type delay. In my case, I prefer to use it as a chorus and doubler, since as a delay I'll use the next module, the stereo echo. We activate the chorus simply by turning on chorus block 1. The first parameter here is sweep speed, which lets us adjust the oscillation speed of the modulation. We can go from a maximum of 1 Hz down to a minimum of 1/4 of a Hz, that is 0.250. To do this, just adjust the rate control of the chorus. I set it to 0.500 because that's the default value in the Rockman stereo chorus. We can also activate the long chorus switch by selecting channel B. Note that the right channel is always dry while only the left channel is modulated. This is intentional and how the original Rockman stereo chorus works. With the Mode Select button, we can choose to use the stereo chorus in chorus mode or delay mode. To do this, simply turn off the chorus block and activate delay block 2. In this mode, the modulation oscillation is off and we can simply select the delay of the left channel from a minimum of 20 milliseconds to a maximum of 200 milliseconds. To do this, just adjust the time control. For convenience, on channels A, B, C, and D I set common values. Of course, we can modify the feedback and delay volume parameters by acting on master feedback and level control. Now we come to the output mix section, which lets us choose how the two channels exit the stereo chorus. To do this, select the mixer block and use channels A, B, C, and D, which correspond respectively to the four modes: wide, normal, equal, and subtle. The first two modes, wide and normal, are stereo, while the last two modes, equal and subtle, are mono. In A, that is wide mode, the two right and left channels are completely separated. In B, normal mode, the two channels are separated by only 60%. In C, equal mode, both channels are centered and have the same intensity, so we are in mono. Finally, in D, subtle mode, the two channels are also centered, but the left channel, the one with active modulation, has an output level exactly half. Of course, we can use these controls also when using delay mode. Now we come to the Rockman Stereo Echo, which is basically a serial 2-tap delay where the delay time of the left channel is always 3/5 of the right one. Here we can adjust the value from a minimum of 75 to 125 up to a maximum of 300 to 500. So we activate the delay simply by turning on delay block 1, and here on channel A, we find minimum delay values of 75 and 125. On channel B, medium values 150 and 200. And on channel C, maximum values 300 and 500. Finally, we can adjust the feedback controls and volume controls simply by acting on master feedback and mix. So, this is how I structured my preset, and this is how it should be used. I want to inform you that inside the package I included a second preset called RobiRox Settings, in which I created 8 scenes that faithfully reproduce the 8 programs I made in my Rockman MIDI Octopus, which is a MIDI-controlled switch. In these 8 scenes, I faithfully replicated the 8 sounds I use here in the studio. Let me play you something. I hope you like this preset of mine. It's available on my website www.robirox.it for Fractile AX FX3, Fractile FM9, and with the necessary adjustments also for Fractile FM3. Bye!